So we're live, Jim.
Okay.
So
If I've got a minute, I'm going to go over and make sure my speakers are off over there because I saw it flicker, but I don't want a 10-second lag of every word I say. Hang on. Ready when you are.
So welcome everybody to our Getting the Most Out of Ancestry Library Edition. My name is Melissa from Willard Library, and joining us is Jim Jackson. Jim is a professional researcher and genealogist from Battle Creek. He will be sharing some tips and hints on how to get the most out of Ancestry Library Edition. So if you're aware of Ancestry, it's one of our online resources from the library that we offer. Typically, it's only available if you're inside the library, but the last couple of months, Ancestry has offered this database to our library guests outside of the library from home. So until September 30th, you still have access to Ancestry, the library edition from home. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and he's going to give us some tips on how to use it and get some hints. So, hi, Jim.
Hi, Melissa. How are you?
Good.
All right. Well, I've got a screen up on my computer, and I don't know if you're maneuvering that to the population.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. I don't see it on my computer over there, so I guess that was a wasted effort. But at any rate, I'm on kind of a secondary screen of the Willard Library from home. And when you log into the very first page, you'll still see these headings, I believe, at the top. Or if your window's very small, you'll see like 3 lines over to the right. Click on that and these will open up. And what I did was go to the local history section of the Willard Library. Now, you'll see this local and family history library. I'm going to go down a little bit because remote access with library cards, these are all the things you can do from home, always with your library card. And then there's on-site access only. And then the third group is open access. This is available to anyone, anywhere. So if you have friends in Florida or something who want some photographs, old photographs of the Battle Creek area, or surprisingly, they've got photographs of all of the homes in Battle Creek back in the 1940s era. So these are kind of neat. You can see the house that your grandmother grew up in or something that may not even be there anymore. So normally, if you're at the library, you go down to on-site access only, and there's ancestry option there. That's not what we're talking about today. If you click that, you're not going to go anywhere. You need to go to remote access with library card, and across the top, you'll see Heritage Quest here, ProQuest, and /ancestry. Now that's the link that is going to take us to the library edition, but you can use it in your own home. So you click that and it'll ask for your library card and PIN number. And I've already done that, but I just want to show how this comes up. Not that speedily, but here it is to access ProQuest Ancestry. Log in here. Whoops, I didn't want that there. But here's, eventually you'll get, when you do log in, you'll get to this begin searching. And then you have, and search over 200 million obituaries, newspapers, and so on. And you can just click begin searching or go down a little bit further and you'll see some options here for using the census records for a specific year and so on. Doing genealogy, it's the third most popular hobby in the United States. It's the third largest searched websites on the internet, right behind financial websites and the other websites we won't even talk about. But here's you can go and to begin searching. What I always recommend, if there's any one rule, you always want to work with from what you know to the unknown. Start with yourself and work backwards. And genealogy has a lot of forms for organizing the information you find. Many of the forms have slots for information about birth dates and birthplace, marriage date, marriage place, and death date and death place. Genealogy is really much more than that. The more you can find about the everyday life of each ancestor, the more rich your family story is going to be. So we're going to be looking at anything we can find that puts someone in a place and time. And that could be land records, it could be tax lists, it could be most anything. While I'm waiting for this to come up, there's a couple things I want to point out here. Learning Center and charts and forms. I believe charts and forms may be free on the regular Ancestry all the time. And let me go into that to show some of these. The two basic forms that you use before anything else are Pedigree Charts and Family Group Sheets, and they have those. And actually, so here's the ancestral chart, and it's also called a pedigree chart, and it's really just starts with one person, probably you, and then your father and your mother, which you have one of each, or two parents. And you're going to have 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, and 16, 32, 64. It goes on and adds up pretty quick. And then a research calendar. It's when you're sending queries. It used to be you had to wait for the U.S. mail and everything, but nowadays, even with emails, people don't always get back to you right away, and sometimes they don't get back to you at all. So it's good to have a research calendar so you know who you contacted about what question and if they ever did respond. And correspondence log, here's a family group sheet. This again keeps track of the husband, the wife, and all their children, and so on. Let's go back to the Learning Center, because this will give you some information long after we're done here today. There's research aids about getting started. There's census, beyond the basics, and each one of these are documents from a few pages to maybe 30 pages long. Ethnic, military, and immigration records, and you can go down on any of these in more detail as you go. So that's a good learning thing. The maps are not really maps. The maps are looking for a geographical location. So if you're interested in Pennsylvania land records, click on there, and this will tell you, let me do Michigan so that you may be more familiar. Whoops, I didn't like that. It heard me talking about Pennsylvania and stuck me there. But here's vital records, which are birth, marriage, and death, or hatch, match, and dispatch. Census records for Pennsylvania. Census records vary from state to state because the federal population census, if you think of it, is really just for states. There's probably not going to be a good federal census record for Alaska in 1920. So This will tell you when they started, how many survived, because a lot of these get burned in courthouse fires, and where to send away for some of these vital records with the addresses and possibly even email information. So, and that's not just states, I believe. I think that's outside the United States. So that's pretty cool too. So let's go into some of these records. Census records I've used I think everyone, that's their go-to source. They tried to count everyone. They weren't perfect, but the attempt was to count everyone. Whereas any other record, whether it's military or land records, there was no attempt to count every single person in the United States, because not everyone served, not everyone bought land. But the census tried to count everyone, men, women, and children. And in doing so, you can use the census records for finding records that are not available to you. I was conducting a search for, in the Upper Peninsula, at an insane asylum. And those records from the 1860s are still sealed for privacy. I don't think anyone's going to complain that was there, but that's just the law. But with the census, you can find prison records. You can find insane records. You can look at all the people that were at a particular orphanage. So, if you're told those records are private, or there's no access, or even if they were destroyed, you can fall back on the census. So I'm going to look for, let me see, let's try Thomas Edison. If you're familiar with his biography, he was living in Port Huron. I'll put that there. I'm just, oops, got to put my fingers in the right keys. I'm just going to put Michigan. And as you type, you see it will fill up. If I were to type Battle Creek, it may come up with half a dozen Battle Creeks, and until you get to Calhoun County. And we know he was born in 1847. He was living in Port Huron when he was a youth, and he should be on the 1860 census, 1860 or 1850. Well, here's Alva Edison. They came up when I typed in Thomas. Some indexer indexed it under both names. This is probably not going to happen for your ancestor who nobody has ever heard of. But it's kind of neat, because this will show you all the information at a glance. He was living in Port Huron, and born in Ohio. It doesn't give his parents' name. That came in 1880. And he was living in a household with Samuel, Nancy, and himself, Alva. And we can go on to the actual census here. And once we're into the census, you can print this on your home printer. You can download it to your computer. If you're at the library, you want to bring a flash drive where you can download it, because if you download it to their computers, they're wiped clean every time they're rebooted in the morning. So you would lose that. So let me see how I can get up here. Here we go. And someone through the years put a big arrow for Alva. Now, I have seen Thomas Edison's name. I've seen Thomas Alva Edison in different documents. I've never seen just Alva. This may have been his mother's pet name for him, and she is the one who answered the door and answered the questions to the enumerator? Don't know. But this is a good explanation of why. Well, gosh, I can find them in the 1850 and 1860 in the same town, and I can find them in 1880 and even 1900 in the same town, but I can't find them in 1870. They just disappeared. Well, they may have gone somewhere and not been in town, or it may not have just been indexed correctly, like this one. Normally, if you're looking for Thomas Edison, you're not going to find him here. And the same for the Wright brothers in Dayton, Ohio in 1900. There's Orville and there's a William, not Wilbur. So, and I get this all the time. Well, my ancestor's name was Clark with an E. They never spelled it any other way. That may be true, but the clerk that wrote it down and heard it the way they did, wrote it down, and that's what is on the record, and that's what will be indexed. And it's a good idea to, when you're in these records, to go back and forth a few pages. For one thing, you may find other families that they married into, at least they were friends with, and they may have moved from place to place with those same people. And also, if you, well, let me show you this, where you just hover over, if you can't make it out, the indexer, this is their information. That's not, doesn't mean it's accurate, but that may help you in reading it. Sometimes going back and forth helps in getting an idea of the flow of the handwriting. The L's and the S's, capital S's, capital L's, are very similar back then. Here's lumberman. It's not a sumberman. And in this case, there's a few S's on the page. Smith and Samuel up here. Very similar to the summerman. Here's a range on the back so you can make it smaller, larger, and sometimes that'll help in reading the bad handwriting. There's also some tools over here to make it white writing on black background, which sometimes that helps, just the contrast of that in when it's really a poor condition of census records. So let me see. Oh, he's actually, let me go back too, because I want to show you the 1930. And this may take a while, but Thomas Edison, we saw 1860. Let's go to, here's someone used him in a United States Sons of American Revolution membership application. That doesn't mean Thomas did that, but he's included on someone else's family tree so that they were proving that Thomas was in the line going back to their revolutionary ancestor. So again, if this was your ancestor, you want to take a look at some of these other things that popped up and find a grave. Just popping that up is going to give you the information of what they have on Find a Grave, which is a great site. They don't always have this, but this has his birth date, death date. It'll at least tell you where the person is buried. Now, there may be more than one of these on a common name. So at the top here, you can really narrow down the number that you get. If you look at this, you'll see that, okay, there were 8,000 hits for Thomas Edison. If I just play with this a little bit, let's make it a little bit tighter. And I'm going to say birth date to plus or minus 2 years. I never go less than 1 year because even if you're just looking at census records, depending on when their birthday is and depending on if the census enumerator was there in April or June, depending on the year or the decade, the age may vary back and forth, honestly. And it's amazing how many of our ancestors only age 9 years every decade. And I'm not going to touch, well, I will go to country for Michigan. So I could say the state or adjoining states. So if I update this, instead of 8,479, I'm going to get somewhat less, which would be usually much more manageable. In this case, 74 is a lot better than several thousand. So there's 1860 again. This time at the top, I got this family tree, which these are good if they have sources, and many of them do. So, in fact, I will go into that. All these family trees are things put together by individuals on the web. Now, not knowing the quality, I mean, the quality varies, and you just never know. But in this case, I can look down here under sources, and it tells me all the sources that they used. And here's the Daughters of American Revolutionary lineage book, and some state census, newspaper and obituary index. Eventually I'll get down, well, I won't get down to the census, I guess. So we'll have to go back. But again, a real good thing. Now I can click on any one of these, and it shows me what record that's tied to. And it looks like this is a handwritten ledger of the marriages for Summit, Ohio. So let me go back again. I'm still interested if I can get the 1930 census. Maybe not. I could if I just went into the 1930 census on that first page where they had different census years and plugged in Thomas Edison for, I think he was in New Jersey then. What I wanted to show you though was his occupation was investor. And if you look at the census record, you can see it was inventor. Well, the N was mistaken for an S for inventor, investor. So there are going to be mistakes on the census itself, and there are going to be mistakes on indexing what people saw when they indexed the census. So be aware of, use your imagination when you're looking for variant spelling names and everything else of these people. So let's look for someone else, maybe more locally. Now I can edit the search, which I'll probably do rather than go back a page. The update was when I adjusted these slides. The edit search. Now I'm going to look for Erastus. You all have an Erastus, right? I got my one. And Hussey. And we'll say he was born in 1800. And this show more options, I'll go back to that because that's very useful when you can't find the person you're looking for. Now this Sylvanus, Erastus Fuller Hussey. That's the guy we're looking for that lived in Battle Creek here. He died in Battle Creek anyway, coming from New York. So again, I will go into, and the nice thing about the editing search, it uses these set up the way you had them previously. Otherwise, they'd all be over to the left and I'd have to adjust each one for every search. So let's go into the family tree again. And here's his home in Battle Creek. Looks like maybe not Battle Creek. And shows he was married to Sarah Eddie Bowen. And this one includes all the deaths of his siblings, which I don't know if that's new or I just haven't seen that before too much in probate. Over on the middle here shows all the sources again and how they're tied in. And then here it shows, when it knows it, it shows his mother and father. It shows all his siblings, which is hidden just because of space. And it shows his spouse and all his children. If I click on the siblings side tab, that will open up to all his brothers and sisters that, again, they have to be on this chart in order to see that. Quite a few in the Hussey family. Susan Hussey, surprisingly, the daughter of Erastus Hussey, married a man by the name of Erastus Hussey. I believe it was a second cousin. I had to be some kind of relation. But so she was, I think on Find a Grave, she's Susan Hussey. So she's really a Hussey here. Going on here. So again, it shows her parents, her husband, her first husband, her second spouse, Erastus Henry Hussey. And again, if you click on any of these, the residents in 1850, I know that's going to be showing to a census record. Looks like up at the top, the 1850 census record, but also in the biographical review of Calhoun County. And once you're in here on your own family, you can start poking around here and look for these other siblings, the children, the parents, and go on and on. Now, if I go up to the top, if I click on this here, these are all the pictures that have been scanned in and uploaded to Ancestry for this, in this particular Erastus family tree. So let me go in and see what we have here. There's, you never know what you're going to find. Sometimes there's just documents like the census for that family. Sometimes there's portraits, either photographs or paintings or drawings. Here, and there's some information off to the right. Erastus Hussey building on Water Street with the railroad tracks. And again, Mary EDES, it was EDDY on the previous page. So again, it helps to get more than one document when you're looking for these records. Here's an extract from one of those sources, one of the biographies. And here's another one, biography of Erastus Hussey. Doesn't say where that's from. It may, American Biographical History of Eminent and Self-Made Men. And that's kind of grayed out. Oh, no, okay, so here's his family stone at Oak Hill Cemetery over here with all the different information. And this preview not available, download to view. It's the obituary, which again, you should be able to get that from the newspapers on the library website. You can view all the Battle Creek newspapers up to 1922 and before from home. 23 and above, you have to be on site to do that. And here's where he served in the House of Representatives. And eventually we'll get, there's a photograph, or probably a photograph of a drawing or painting. And here's his death certificate. All the death certificates are online between 1897 and 1930, I want to say. You can actually download or print that death certificate for anyone died in Michigan. And even beyond 1930, the information is there up to 1940, I believe, just not the actual scan of the document itself. So here we're getting into some census 1880. Here's a plat map. And if I click on this, it should come into focus a little bit. Well, maybe not, a little bit. Here's E. Hussey up here. Here's J. Kellogg, John Kellogg down here. So they were kind of neighbors. And tax assessment lists. This isn't going to give you a lot of family information, but again, if you can find a place where your ancestors actually were, sometimes that's all you need, and you start looking at that new place and you find all kinds of records. Even in the case of a tax record, though, you can compare their value of the real estate on a census record or the value of taxes that they pay every year to all the others. And you can kind of tell if the family's just starting out with a small farm, or if, you know, they've got acreage after acreage, or if they've maybe living on their child's farm, probably retired, but they didn't call it retiring back then. You just went off to live with your kids, who probably inherited their farm in the first place. So it's before rest homes were in vogue. Let me try one more that will take us off the Ancestry page, but we'll be able to get back to it. So I'm going to go one more. I'm going to go back in to edit the search and look for someone else that you may or may not be familiar with. Okay, Autry. This isn't Jean. Half the people out there are saying, who is Gene Autry? Let's say he was born 1931. Autry Mixon, I don't know if any of you are familiar with him, at least by that alias. Death index, find a grave. I was hoping I would find a grave, but I don't think I'm going to find it. And I rehearsed this also. You get different results every week or so when you look. So that's a good example of make sure you go back in. Well, this is the guy, so I don't know if we're going to find anything on newspaper obits or not. Now, on my home version of Ancestry, there's a separate subscription for newspapers. I don't have that, so I don't even get this on my home thing. So that's kind of neat. Now, here you can view a printer friendly before you print this information off. He was born in Arkansas, died in Battle Creek. He again is buried in Oak Hill Cemetery. And he was an entertainer known as Junior Walker, and brought his all-stars up here from, I think, Michigan City or someplace in Indiana, and settled in Battle Creek. There's a nice carving of a saxophone on his headstone. So I was hoping to find the find a grave here, because that sometimes for find a grave, it will remove you from the ancestry and warn you that it's taking you somewhere else, and it'll be in a different tab, so you can always, you're not going to lose your place on Ancestry, but it will take you to a different location. Probably should have done that on one of the other ones that had the headstone or the find a grave up there. Well, let's find, Thomas has that, I think. I don't know if it was in the family. Find a grave. We'll do this, find a grave, to show you what I meant. Again, just hovering over will give you some information. This gives you even more, shows you some of the photographs that are available on Find a Grave and a lot of the information. But again, you can go to the website here, and when I click that, it'll take you right to the individual page just for this one person. This 1630 is the memorial ID. Normally they're in the millions, but anywhere in Find a Grave, if you click on memorial and type in that number, it'll take you right here, and you can kind of build your own virtual cemetery if you want for your own family, so that they're all connected together, and you can just click from one to the next. Again, this is kind of set up the same way, where you have biographical information, and then you have the other family members, the parents, the spouses, the siblings, the children, and you can click on any one of those. And while you're here, you can even view other people in that, see other Edisons in that cemetery or in that county or in that city or that county or that state or the country. So, but again, that popped up in a new site, so I'm going to go back to the Ancestry. Now, there was something I wanted to show you too, and I don't remember what that was when I said, oh, that was the more information. Let me do that. Just wait till this all comes up. And again, if you're really just looking for census records or say military records and not interested in anything else, you can pare it down here. You can see, even as we went here, we go up here, there's we're down to 74 sources, but I can narrow it down to 28 if I'm just looking for census, or 5 if I'm just looking for immigration records type things. So I can narrow that down. And so I go to update. Okay, now when I go into edit this search, I put the person's name, and say I can't find them. Well, this show more options, I can add different events. I put the birth year in, which is kind of a default to begin with. But if all I know is the marriage year, I can put that in, or location. Same with the death. They resided in this location, or any event, and there's even more. But the really nice thing here about, I can add family members. So if you have, and you can click sibling several times to add 4 or 5 different siblings. I did this for one Snyder family I was searching for on my mother's side, and I could not find them in one census. So as it was back in the day, back in the 1800s, it wasn't unusual to have 12 to 16 kids. So I started plugging in all the siblings I knew of. Like there was, and a lot of them were common names like Mary, Elizabeth, John, Robert. So every family is going to have those. But then there were a couple others like Cornelius and Lilius and names, all those together. So I plugged all those in here and did my search with no surname. And I only got like a half a dozen hits for Michigan. And one of them, I never did find a Snyder, but one of them, their surname was Guyder, Goiter. And when I looked at it, it was definitely written Snyder. So this more information can be really helpful when you're using Ancestry as a tool to find family information. And oftentimes you'll find you hit a brick wall, which means you just can't find anyone. You're always kind of looking for those people in the back of your mind. It's not a constant search, but you kind of keep an eye open for them as years go by. And sometimes that's a good way for these to pop up, because people did just disappear for no apparent reason, but sometimes you can find them. My father was old when he got married. He was even older when I came along. So he had 3 brothers who served in World War I. And he had like 13 brothers and sisters, and they were all born in London, Ontario, except one that was born in 1900 that was born in St. Louis, Missouri. And it's like year after year after year, it's London, 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 St. Louis, London, London, London. And it's like, what in the world happened there? Well, it was the year that they had their exhibition there, the Columbian exhibition or World's Fair. You remember the movie Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland. That was when my one aunt was born. Now, this was before doctors treating pregnant ladies, because it was not considered a medical issue back then. So it's not like she had to get a doctor's permission to travel, but I don't know why anyone would travel in their 9th month. That's quite a ways from London, Ontario to St. Louis. I'm guessing all by train. So, but again, sometimes it took me a while to piece that together, because someone said, well, I remember they had a plate or something from the St. Louis Expo. And I put the dates together, so that's must have been what happened. So are there any questions, Melissa, at this point, or comments, ideas that they had?
Nope, there aren't yet, but if anyone does have a questions, feel free to type it in, and we'll see if we can get something answered.
I've kind of focused on census records because those are really the easiest and most commonly used things, especially to get started. But you can see all these court land wills financial. And I did come across one of these when I was going from the screens. There was some probate records. Probate isn't just for wills and estates. They're for committing a senior member of the family, either legitimately to protect him from himself or nefariously to get his land because he's been on death's door for 30 years now. But there's also adoption records. There's juvenile guardianship records, especially if one of the parents dies. If there's a minor, they need a guardian appointed to look after his interests or her interests. So probate covers an awful lot of family information. So don't and land records. I didn't use land records for a while, and when I first started, because I didn't think there'd be any family information in them. I've bought in houses, and there was, they'd never asked for my parents' names or anything. But you have to think about how they identified an individual before Social Security numbers. So you'll see land records or probate records of, this is John Smith, son of Robert and Sarah Smith from some city you never heard of in New York. And sometimes even more than that. One of the first meetings I went to at the Detroit Society was talking about German guild records, which are apprenticeship groups. And as this is going to be easy because German guild records back in the 1800s, to apply for an apprenticeship, you had to provide your parents' names and their birth and death dates if they were not living, and their godparents. And you had to do that for all four of your grandparents and their godparents. And it's like, wow, that's why I thought this is really going to be simple. Unfortunately, I haven't traced my German records back to Germany yet, but once I get there, I know it'll be much simpler than what I've been working with the last 40 years.
So, Jim, I do have a question. Elizabeth wants to know, what about family last names changing at Ellis Island? Would that be a stumbling block?
Again, if you know some of the siblings, you may be able to find them through Ancestry that way. It's not, apparently it wasn't done as much as the stories go, but I do know of several cases where it has been changed. Some immigrants changed them on their own to Americanize their names. I mean, this is their new adopted country, so they dropped the berg or the ski on the end of their name, or just came up with some, maybe I forget the German name for black, but that may have been their surname, and they changed it to Black, which is the American translation of what their name used to be. Many of the names were either occupations, like you see a lot of carpenters and millers and things, and they just changed it from the original language to the Americanize it. But it didn't just happen at Ellis Island. A lot of clerks in City Hall, they wrote down what they heard. And Ellis Island had to be terrible because you're not dealing with one clerk, maybe two people with maybe 20 people in the room. You're dealing with hundreds and hundreds of people in the room where the acoustics are not great and everyone's yelling in different languages, and you're trying to get the information to fill out the forms. So, and people had, it's whenever I have a genealogy class, I have everyone introduce themselves, and everyone has to write down all the names and turn them in. And that's handed back to them when we talk about the census, because invariably people will hear something different than what is spoken. And you'll run into, that's why I said earlier about be aware of variant spellings. It could be a number of reasons why names are spelled differently, or they even went by different names, like Thomas and Alva in the one census. But again, just because your family always spelled it one way doesn't mean that's what all the records are going to say. I had a cousin named Coughlin, L-A-N, went in the Marines, and they spelled it L-I-N, and he tried for 4 years to get it corrected. And eventually it was pointed out to him that Marines don't make mistakes. So that branch of the family has a different last name than all his brothers and sisters and their children. And again, years from now, no one will know why that happened. Why did he want to change his name? But those things do happen.
So I also
That's a good question.
Yeah. So there's a couple of other comments that were made that we have a couple users that are feeling more comfortable using this. So thank you, Jim, for showing us how to use it. One reminder that I would like to throw out is that library users do have to have your library card and your PIN number. So if you have any questions about your library account or what that number is, just feel free to contact the library and we can gladly help you out with getting that information for you.
Yeah, I think this is a great service for the COVID. I'm glad I know it wasn't just automatic. There was some behind the scenes finagling to get this available to us. So I appreciate the staff doing that.
I'm just giving a couple more minutes to see if anyone else asks anything.
And you don't have to wear a mask when you're doing it from home.
Yeah. So a question that I had, you used a birth date a lot. What if you don't know the birth date? Can you work around it?
Well, you can guess, and that birth date, I still have that. You still have my screen up there?
Yes, we do.
Melissa, are you still seeing my screen?
Yes, I do.
Okay. This birth date, the options are exact, plus or minus 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, or broad, meaning they don't use it. So you can kind of guess usually if you know the relative ages of all their siblings, you can kind of put it in the middle somewhere and say plus or minus 10 years. Or you can do the same for any other date. Those variables are the same for marriage date or death date. And you can put all the dates in there. The more information you put, the less you're going to get, to the point where you may be striking out. Like Edison, if I had limited it to Michigan, I wouldn't be seeing the other states in there. And that's probably why I didn't see that other. No, I've got country on there. So I should have seen the New Jersey census. But yeah, you want to narrow it down to get it to a manageable figure, but not so much that you're excluding things that may be relevant.
So another question came in more about library access. when it is discontinued at home and you have to be in the library again, I believe you can use your own. Someone's asking if you can use your own laptop in the library and use it. I think that works when you're in the library. I'm going to write that down and double check with our tech.
I can tell you that that works.
Oh, good. Okay.
In fact, before they came out with this, I would park in the parking lot for an hour and or however long till it kicked me off. Well, it wasn't more than an hour because back then we were having 98-degree days, and even when I parked right in front under the tree, 90 degrees in your car is not pleasant. But I was trying to finish up a project I was working on for all the veterans that were buried at Oak Hill Cemetery. And I just finished that up, but there were a lot of obituaries and things I was trying to get. So yeah, there I was able to get newspapers from 1923 to current. So all of your things you can log in from the library, and I just downloaded them to my flash drive, and I was good to go.
I'm going to take, I think there's another question. Jara says, I have a third cousin who has researched a lot of information on my mother's side of the family. May
Mm-hmm.
I just copy her information?
It's a good place to start, and it's easier to verify or disprove something rather than looking for a needle in a haystack. So I would definitely use what you can, but I would try and verify. And again, starting with yourself, that's good practice. Dig up or try to find your own birth certificate, marriage license, and so on, and any other tax list or anything that might be in the public domain. Now you have to pay for some of those things, but some things are available online for free, like the earlier death certificates. So when you've found all those things for yourself, do the same for your parents, and then go back and find their siblings and your aunts and uncles and the cousins and things. So that's good practice. But yeah, you want to try and verify what you can, and by more than one source if possible. Just to birth, marriage, and death. The birth, you're going to have civil records like birth certificate. You're going to have church records or synagogue records or something for some type of baptism or christening for most religions. Some religions don't. Some religions baptize adults rather than infants, but many religions try to get infants, and as soon as possible, they may be baptized the same day they're born, especially back in the 1800s when infant mortality was so bad. So, and there may be newspaper notices too. And that's those three things, the civil, the church, and the newspapers, that's going to be true for birth, marriage, and death. So there's a lot of different sources. And I don't know how many times I've come across an obituary that is printed before the date on the death certificate. So there, you want to make a note of discrepancies like that, because who knows, was the heir, where was the heir? Maybe he wasn't dead yet quite, and or maybe the doctor got it wrong. Sometimes these are done after the fact, like at the end of the week, and the doctor may have got his dates mixed up.
So everyone says thank you, Jim. That was very helpful. That was helpful. Thank you.
This is the first time I've had a standing ovation. I'm very impressed.
I think you do. Yep.
I can dream.
Yep. I think people are. So thank you very much for doing this for us. again, if you're watching, please feel free to contact us if you have questions, and we can help out any way we can. So I hope everyone has a good evening. Thank you, and thanks for joining us. Thanks,
Well,
Jim.
thanks for putting
Thank
this on.
you.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Thanks. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.